Lovely to see you. It's a bit windy and blustery and noisy out here, but I'm still going to show you the garden while we just wait for this Facebook Live to get onto Facebook, and then my beloved husband will be sharing it around in the groups that I belong to, who are kind enough to let me do that. And while that's all happening, I'm going to show you the garden because it's nice out here, but it's just a bit noisy. So we'll go inside once I'm ready to start raving on about the thing. So here's the world. There's the garden. And I guess I never get tired of looking at the trees in the wind. You can see the clouds scudding on by up there, which is lovely to watch. And you know, the sunlight on the cherry leaves. It's beautiful out here. I just enjoy this. And the sound of it. It's beautiful. And we still got some flowers. I mean, we're in autumn, fall, if you're in the States, that's the word you use. But we've got some Japanese anemones here nodding in the wind. And the loculia is pretty finished. You can see there's a late flower, excuse me, in here. That's lovely. And I love seeing how the sunlight comes through these leaves. They're beautiful. They're really big leaves. Have a look. I mean, there's my hand and there's a leaf, right? So they're big. I'm standing in the garden here, but what the heck. And we've got this beautiful fuchsia, which brings me so much pleasure because it's so bright. It's just lovely. Coming out here. And little roses. The Cecile Brunner rose mixed up with anemones. They flower at this time of the year, which is really nice to see. And look, we've got some compassion roses here. And it's beautiful. And well, just fuchsias and roses really. There's not much else going on. But what I will show you, just pan across here, you think, why is all that brown stuff there? It's because I spread some compost around. And we've got late dahlias still. Just lovely, bright, sharp. And look at the centre. And look at those little curly petals there. It does little special extra curls sometimes. I think it's trying to say, I was a double once. I really was a double. I'm not just a single flower. Look, we've got a little bee that's having a rest on a rather nibbled dahlia there. And so yeah, it's all happening. And this is the bed. This is the bulb bed, which I just put lots of compost on. Because I realised that the bulbs in here are hungry. You know, they've made flowers for probably 20 years and I've never really fed them. And so I did a big weed and fed them. So next spring, or well, actually next winter, when they flower, they're going to be lovely. And we still have these fabulous sedum. I just love these, the repeating pattern here. It's beautiful. This is a rest. I don't know, I can just watch these, can just look at them, and the very sight of them is just lovely to my eyes. So one more thing before we go inside and get on topic is this lovely golden calendula. It's great to see you jumping on, peeps. Takes a little while sometimes for the video to propagate out to Facebook. So that's why I'm out here in the garden still. I promise I will get to the point. But this is really nice to see. So now I'm going to go inside. This is me walking up my path on a sunny day and tell you all about what I've spent this morning writing for the God of Me project, which is what this is. This is the weekly God of Me update. The weekly live that I do that says, well, this is what I wrote today and why and what it's for and how it's useful to you. And I always I have a little pad Oh yes, I'm more or less straight, not on too much of a lopsided. Here's my little notepad, and I always just write myself some wee notes about what I want to tell you that I've been doing. So here's what I've been doing. Finally, I'm really quite excited and a little bit dazed and confused. That whole thing of emotional addiction that I've been working on, writing and explaining for weeks, and in fact, that was like our first big goal. And I've been doing this for about 6 months, right? These weekly things. I looked it up the other day. I thought it was in September that I started. And since September, I've been working on the process of getting to explain emotional addiction, how we can get addicted to our own bad feelings. And that boils down to the fact that if you do anything over and over again, after a while the body will memorize it. It'll just make it how it always is, and it'll keep doing that. And more than that, when we want to change, the body will resist us because it's got used to what is normal. And our bodies evolutionarily are designed to keep things the same. They resist when we try to change things. So if you've been miserable, like I had, miserable might be too strong a word, but I had not been happy for a long time. And when you go to feel happy, not only is it like, I don't know how to feel happy. What do you mean feel happy? Are you kidding me? Not only is it like, I don't know how to do this, but also when you try to do it, it feels really bad. It does. Are you kidding? And I would get angry. It's like, are you kidding? Feel better? Feel happy? Piss off. Really? And that was, I understand it now. That was my body saying, no, 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 no. I am used to being unhappy. Let me stay the way that I have become accustomed and conditioned to being. And that happens at a cellular level. And we've got, if you go back through the history on YouTube, you can see that I talked about receptors and how our cells change because of the chemistry that we produce by how we think and behave and feel all the time. What we do most commonly changes our cells, and it changes how they function. And when you change from doing, from being one way most of the time to being another way most of the time, your body and your brain actually have to change. And they can find that really hard. And that's because we are evolutionarily programmed to resist change, because if our bodies were changing all the time, it would be kind of difficult. So, what did I write about today? Well, I spent some time just sort of looking at, I fine-tuned a few things, I shifted a couple of things around, and I thought, yep, emotional addiction is done. I mean, really done. And it's done when I can summarize it. Like there were these little list of bullets of, this is what's happening, this is how it works, this is why it's so hard to change. But the thing is, emotional addiction isn't the only reason, or the only, it's not the only reason why change is really hard. Well, to be more precise perhaps, it's part of the reason why change is so hard. It's like, what is it? What's the deal when you just think, well, I want to feel differently, and all of that stuff goes on, the noises in your head and your body feels bad and all of that. We need to change, but what are we actually changing? Was the question that I was asking. And you might say to me, well, it's our cells, it's the receptors, and you just talked about all that, and we've got to make different connections in our brain. And that's true. But the big problem that I still haven't explained, because I've been not exactly putting it off, it's just it didn't come into the story, and now it's like it's time in the story to tell this. This is the next big chapter, if you like, or maybe the next section of the book. It's not a book, it's a website, but it feels sort of like I'm writing a book. But this is about how the fact that we want to change, we make a decision, we make a choice in our head. I want to change, I want to be different, I want to have a different life. I want to make something new for myself. I want to get better from being sick. I want to find a wonderful relationship and be happy in that. I want to live somewhere new or do something different for my income. And what we don't understand is that the part of us that is making that decision and making that choice and wanting something different and all of that part of us that's aware, the thinking part of us that goes, I want that and not that, that is precisely, well, I can't say precisely, actually, it's not true. That is only about 5% of who we are. The other 95% is the reason why change is so hard. And we've talked about an aspect of the 95% because that's the, the thinking and the thinking and the thinking and the making the really strong big neural nets. They turn into neural trunks, like a big 16 lane motorway, whatever. It just gets really, really inside your brain. There's a lot of neural hardware that is devoted to feeling however you most commonly feel and doing the things that you most commonly do and being the way that you most commonly are, saying the same things and having the same interactions and all that stuff. It's really hardwired in our brain, and our body gets really used to it. And that's the 95%, because when we memorize things so well that we don't even know that we know how we do them. I mean, if most of who's listening to me, you'll be able-bodied, which means you can stand up and walk whenever you want. But you talk to somebody who has a disability which makes it either very hard or even impossible for them to walk, or maybe somebody who, let's say it's somebody who has been paralyzed and for whatever reason suddenly they have control of their legs again, just imaginary scenario, and they say, okay, I can move my legs again. How do I walk? Huh? And you're thinking, I don't know, I just walk. I stand up and I walk. But how do you actually do that? How do you know to shift your weight? If you're sitting, right, you lean forward and then you put your weight on your feet, and it's got to be, not towards the back of your feet, or you'll just fall back on the sofa when you push up, or whatever you're sitting on, the chair. And if it's too far forward, when you push up with your legs to stand up, you're going to fall forward. So how do you know exactly where to put the balance on your feet just to stand up? How do you know which muscles to contract? How do you know how much to contract each one of those muscles and what to hold steady and what to move? All of that is learned and memorized. You got that in your habit brain. You don't want to forget that. So the person that has never done that before, or imagine an alien who suddenly jumped into a human body and said, well, how do I use this? Imagine how much you'd have to become aware of things that you normally are not aware of. That's the 90. I mean, it's mind-boggling when you think about all the things that we do and feel and say and are and everything, and we don't even know we're doing that, we're being that, we just are that. That 95% that we're not aware of is the reason why change is so hard. Because you can't just make a decision with your 5% of your conscious mind and say, I'm going to be happy now, because that 95% has memorized something else. So we have to find a way to get into the 95% and change it there. And that's the piece that I'm now starting to write about. And because I was thinking, if I'm saying, well, this is the problem, you can't even see that 95%. What is it? It's all the things that you know how to do and be. But more than that, I thought, it's more than that. When we're born, we're not actually born with a completely empty brain. Because when a baby is born, and I looked this up because I thought, I know that babies have some they've got some programs. It's not like a computer. Like if you've ever seen a computer built from scratch or you've done it yourself, you know that you get a machine, you turn it on, nothing happens because there's no operating system. And you have to load up the operating system, and then you have to put things in programs, and you set up users and you set up your preferences, but by the time you do that, there's all this stuff, the operating system and the basic programs that are already installed. And when a baby is born, when each of us is born, we do come installed with a basic operating system. Otherwise our body wouldn't know how to run. And so babies are born with 7 reflexes. The one where you put your finger in the hand of a newborn and it grasps your finger, that's a reflex. If they get startled, then they go, ah, and then they close up. That one lasts for 2 months. It's called the Moro reflex. I learned some stuff. So there are these reflexes. The body knows how to run. The baby knows to cry when it's hungry. It just does that. And when it's not hungry, it doesn't cry. There are basic programs in place. And of course, they're the things that help a baby to survive and to bond with its mother and all that stuff. So we're not completely empty. But how do we get from there to being somebody like me, who's been in my body for 56 years and 57 this year, You know what happens? Well, of course you learn and you have experiences and all of that, but I don't remember 95% of that. 95% of that's in here. And more than that, in the first about the first 7 years of a child's life, there's a thing that goes on in their brain. And this is what I'm going to be writing about. And I just started, I'm at that messy stage in writing where I just have to brain dump and I have to throw things on, well, not on paper, on screen. I have to make bullets and I have to write things that is little bits of sentences and try and get the flow going in my awareness. And I realized eventually, okay, I have to now talk about brainwaves. Because when a baby is born, I mean, okay, and I'm fine, got to back off. There are 5 kinds of brainwaves, from really slow to really fast. Delta, really slow. You're asleep, bud, babe. You're out of it. You're sleeping, and your body is repairing and restoring itself. Theta, you might have heard of that. It's the state that hypnotists aim to get their clients into, because in theta, you're not asleep and you're not awake. And in theta, that 95% is available and it's programmable. That's when the unconscious part of us, which is the autonomic part of us that runs our body and means we know how to talk and walk and do all of those things and feel bad or feel good or whatever it is, the automatic aspect of ourselves, that 95%, you can do stuff with it in theta. When your brain's going a little bit faster, now you're awake, but you're relaxed and you're chilled out. You might be reading a book, or you might be doing some art, or you might be just looking at nature. That's alpha. You're relaxed, you're awake, but you're not all perked up and wired. And beta, you're concentrating, you're working, you might be learning. Your brain's active. It's going faster. It's got more information to process. And then there's another state called gamma. Which is very fast, and it can be very high concentration, or it can be super consciousness. It feels really good when you're in coherent gamma. I haven't talked about coherence yet. There's brainwaves, and then there's brainwaves. You can have brainwaves that are all blah, 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 and they're not all working together, and then you can have brainwaves where they're just all the same. And it's fantastic. It feels really good. I know how to do that. This is part of what helps you be God of you, by the way. Is understanding your brain and knowing how to get it to work well for you. Because when your brain's working well, you feel good. And when your brain is working bad, you feel like shit. Truly. And I understand what that feels like now. So, what we need to change is where we can't even see that 95%, but we need to be able to get into that 95%. And to do that, first thing is you need to understand your brain waves. And I've just given you a really, but you got to be able to slow your brain down, because the thinking part that's doing beta or alpha, you're not able to make the changes that were programmed into you when you were in theta. And now I've got back to the bit that I started at and then got distracted from, because I needed to explain that. A baby, when they're born, is in delta, like they're asleep with their eyes open. And that also is the reason why little newborn babies sleep most of the time, because they're in the brainwave stage for sleep, right? They can't do anything else. And they can just eat and sleep and poop. That's about it. That's what babies do, because the brain is really slow. And then from about age 2, maybe a little earlier, maybe a little bit later, but maybe even up to age 7, the child is in theta. That's hypnosis. That means that you and I and everybody, for the first 6 or 7 years of our lives, and can be a little bit longer, it depends on the individual, for the first 7 years of our lives, we don't have a mind that can say, that thing that person is saying to me is wrong. I'm not a bad person. I'm not a bad boy or a bad girl. I'm not ugly. I'm not stupid, or whatever it is. If my parent is having a bad day and they say, "Oh, you stupid kid," that goes straight in. That's programmed. Because we only get an analytical mind that can disagree with what's coming in from outside of us when we get to age 7 or 8. But before then, you can't argue. It just goes straight in. So we are programmed by our environment, by society, by our parents, by our friends. And none of this is to say, oh, poor me, oh, poor you, oh, poor us. We are victims. We can't change. It happened before I was 7 and before I could argue with it or disagree. No, it's just to explain that this is where the 95% starts. And very much of this we don't remember. Do you know why? Because you can't actually form a conscious memory until your brain can get into alpha. Alpha is a faster speed than theta, and you don't get very many alpha waves until you're 6 or 7, which is why so many of us don't have. I mean, some people have memories of being a baby. I certainly don't. You just don't have the brain waves because the brain consolidates memory in alpha. And if you can't get into alpha, you can't make memories. So the point is that it's all absorbed by the body mind, and I don't know quite how this, I mean, this is stuff I've got to figure out. I've got to learn, I've got to research, I've got to look it up. But everything that comes at us in that time goes into our implicit memory systems, the one that we don't know about and that we don't have any control over, and there's no filter on it. We just take everything literally as it's said to us. So, you know, if you grow up in an environment where people say you're smart, you're beautiful, you can do anything, you're a genius, and yeah, this is not a good thing to do. So no, you can't do that, and no, don't do this, and yes, do this, and you've got constructive criticism going on, and your parents are still people that lose their rag and get frustrated, but the overall balance is positive. And, you know, a good quantity of the signaling that you get that with no filter is telling you that you're a competent and beautiful and loved human being. So you're going to go into the world. That's your operating system. And that's the settings in your operating system. And those are your basic programs. And then you start to grow up and you start to get a critical mind and an analytical mind. You can start to think, hang on a moment, the Easter Bunny really isn't real. And there's no such thing as Santa Claus, right? That is a function of a brain that's gone into alpha or beta, because it can think, it can observe, it can go, no, I don't agree with that anymore. But before that happens, we can't. And that's the 95%, and we have to get into that 95% and change ourselves there. And then we have the opportunity to change the parts of ourselves that we just couldn't change. That's why, and that's how. And I know I'm not telling you the details of how, because I'm still working on creating the tools. I actually made I made a scruffy draft. I think I talked about this last week. I just recorded something on my phone and put a backing track to it and put it in my Patreon and said, here, patrons, try this. And some of them have done it and said, hey, that's cool. It was nice. I felt good. And the whole purpose of that was to help a person switch from a bad state of feeling to a better one. And it's just a simple guided process. And it gives you control, because once you practice that, and there are lots of ways of learning this. I'm not coming up with anything new. I'm just packaging it in a way that serves me and that I feel will serve the audience that I desire to serve, which is the many who can't access it in any other way than if it's free. And I'm not quite sure how that's going to happen, because there will be people that will pay for this. They're my patrons, they're my supporters. But I want to make it available to people who have no money, but still deserve the information that they need to be able to change their lives. And that's my vision and my project. So that's what I'm starting to get my teeth into this. This is another new apple. I got to bite into the apple, find my way into how to tell the story of how we get to change ourselves. And that's what I'm doing this week. That's what I've done. So I will keep you posted. I want to thank you for watching. Thank you for joining in. Appreciate your comments and your interaction if you feel like it. And if you'd like to share, if you'd like to if you'd like to subscribe, if you're watching this on YouTube, then I invite you to do that, and I look forward to sharing the journey with you. And I'll be back next week with another one. Until then, Lots of love. And I've got the slow connection thing over the stop button. There we go. Now I can stop. So, lots more love. Until then.